Welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. This is Entertainment Thursday, but before we get into the entertainment part, we look at matters youth and governance processes. But before we get into that, let me just go through what is making headlines in our local dailies. Let me start with the Standard. Ruto's DRC acid test, that is what is splashed on the front page of the Standard newspaper. They are saying here, crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo is simmering, with doomsayers predicting war in the region that will pose a stern leadership test. President William Ruto yesterday was to chair a meeting of the key players that was met with murmurs over his approach. The next few days will be critical to restoring peace in the mineral-rich country and region. That story is told on page 4, 5, 6 and 7 of the Standard newspaper. Uhuru, Trump aid policy, a wake-up call. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta has chided African countries for crying foul over withheld funding, saying had they prioritized their budgets, they would not be shocked when the US refuses to fund some of Africa's basic needs such as healthcare, noting it's America's right to say no. That story is told on page 9 of the Standard newspaper. Governors reject a new revenue formula. County bosses say the revised calculation will see majority of the devolved units lose money. Read that story on page 3 of the Standard newspaper. D-Day for police in Baby Pendo case. That story is told on page 10. Let us look at what is making headlines on the Star newspaper. Ruto planning to dismiss 15 PSs in major shuffle. Hiring process overshadowed by talk of applicants aged above 60. That story is told on page 4 and 5 of the Star newspaper. There's a photo here splashed on the front page. Sorry State of Nairobi's sewer drainage system. This is after the rain that pounded the city a few days ago, that brought about the evidence of how or the state of the sewer system within the city. Kindiki hits back at Gachagua over Ruto term remark. Deputy President Kithure Kindiki yesterday hit back at his predecessor regarding Gachagua over the latter's campaign that President William Ruto would only serve a single term. He dismissed Gachagua's call as wishful thinking that will never see the light of day. Read that story on page 6 of the Star newspaper. Moving on to Daily Nation. Scandal of quote-unquote doctored census data. That is what is splashed on the front page of the Daily Nation. Population row. For the past 5 years, Kenya has been making financial and policy decisions for 3 countries, Garissa, Mandera and Wajir, based on false data. The High Court has now cancelled the 2019 Kenya National Bureau of Statistics census results for 3 northeastern counties, citing significant irregularities, and ordered a recount within a year, well ahead of the 2027 poll. And that story, you can read it on page 7 of of the Daily Nation. Tshisekedi snubs Ruto meeting for SADC forum. Congolese President Tshisekedi snubbed a meeting convened by President William Ruto to discuss a security crisis in his country, but confirmed attendance of a separate meeting convened by South African countries, putting into doubt his commitment to the East African Community Bloc. You can read that story on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. Well, that is what we have on our local dailies now, and I want us to dive into what we have prepared for today. And already I'm joined by Clive Opao, who is a governance expert. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
And Tabitha Ogutu, who is a governance and development expert. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Unaendeleaje?
Salama. Labda wewe.
Mimi niko salama, nimekuja kazi sasa tuongee maneno ya youth and governance processes. But before we even get into that, I want to get a feel, just in a minute, a feel of your sentiments regarding these headlines. Ruto planning to dismiss 15 PSs in major shuffle, the scandal of quote-unquote doctored census data and Ruto's DRC acid test. Let me start with you, Clive.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Karibu sana.
Yeah, we can see, I think the different dailies have addressed different topics, but my heart first, I'd like to put out my heart out there to the people of DRC Congo, and especially the people in Goma who are currently undergoing a security issue, a major security issue in their country. And you know, my commiserations, and you know, I'd just like to tell them that the people of Kenya really sympathize with them during this difficult period, and we hope that you're going to find a speedy conclusion or a speedy solution to the security issue. So I think that is my my headline, my headline this morning, because we have seen President Ruto struggling here in Kenya. We have seen President Ruto facing backlash from the youth in Kenya. We've seen President Ruto having to form a broad-based government because of the challenges that he's having, you know, governing the country. But we've seen US presidents in the past who have struggled locally but made important missions abroad and succeeded abroad, and they've been able to benefit from the election. So I think this, like the papers are saying, this is an acid test for the president. I think this is going to be an additional task for him, considering we have over 600 troops in Haiti. And looking at the president, he's been trying, at least for the first few months in his presidency, he's been trying to fashion himself as this African, you know, trans-African leader, you know, statesman, and we've seen him trying to go into issues of other countries, trying to address them. So I think if he's able to succeed in his international forays, if he's able to succeed in the things that he's trying to do abroad, maybe it can pay some dividends for him locally. Okay,
Tabitha, your sentiments?
Also, I would like to weigh in and, you know, really empathize and sympathize with the people affected with the wars in Goma. And I hope and pray also that they reach a consensus and we have a ceasefire to this. On Ruto, our president also, you know, trying to play a critical role in making sure that we have a united East African community bloc. I think is so welcome, and I think us as Kenyans, all we can do is support this particular initiative. But then we also need to put our house in order so that when we speak in the international issues and other country issues, that we are also seen to be, you know, a country that values security, its internal security as well. You know, looked into also our issues. Of course, Kenya has not been very good in terms of, you know, internal security of late. We have abductions happening. We in the last week we have seen 2 activists killed, you know, mysteriously and things like this. So I think these are things that some countries look at, and they're saying that if as a country we cannot provide internal security for our citizens, then what gives us the right to, you know, go and speak on issues that relates to other countries? But I have to acknowledge the position of the president. He is the ESC chairperson, and therefore he's doing his work, and we hope that it bears fruit. I've seen a very interesting headline here about Ruto's DRC acid test. I think that one we've mentioned. But the issue on Ruto's planning to dismiss 15 PSS in major shuffle. Again, as a very concerned Kenyans, I think the president should consider highly also the young people when he is appointing and giving positions to the PSS. And the ones being reshuffled, they should be reshuffled on the basis of non-delivery, like they were not able to deliver on their duties, and therefore is bringing in people who will be able to make sure that their transformative agenda that they keep saying about the Kenya Kwanza government is pushed forward, and we see that the government is working for us. So the basis for reshuffling should be so non-political, bring technocrats, not sycophants, and people who are just there to push their own agenda vis-a-vis the issues of Kenya. So I think that is a very critical area for us Kenyans, and women and youth, I think, should be given, they should be given a position in the PSS reshuffle.
Okay, let's actually get into it, because this headline is interesting because it marries with whatever we are talking about, youth and involvement in governance process. And Clive, how do you say, unaweza sema aje regarding youth involvement in governance processes up until last year? How can you rate involvement in those processes, especially when it comes to elections and all that?
Yeah, I think the situation in Kenya right now can best be described by the Irish poet in 1919, William Butler, who said that, like in Kenya right now, I feel like we're just turning and turning in a widening gyre. I feel like we're in this situation where, the center cannot hold. We're in this situation where, like the poet said, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. And the president is in a situation where he needs to do a balancing act. And as much as he wants to appoint, say, 15 PSS, he's looking at regional balancing, I think, for him right now. I think he's for a long time shown us that he doesn't consider the youth an important aspect of his governance, in his government, for example. Because during the election, of course, his major running call was the hustlers. I know the hustlers are majorly young people, but if you look at the cabinet appointments that he did the first time, the reshuffles that have been coming up, and then even the latest one where we had 3 PSS from the three CSS from Mount Kenya region. So I feel like the youth, we have really been sidelined. And even last year during the June 25th protest, when we really championed for youth involvement in governance, we only got 1 CS in the Ministry of Water. So we are saying, like as young people, yes, we realize that the older people in government might think the youth are inexperienced or the youth do not want to be involved, but we have seen lately what the power of the young people, even in terms of calling them to account, in terms of sending emails. Even to the latest one is the King of Netherlands, who is supposed to come in Kenya in March. The government of Netherlands has received over 10,000 emails from young Kenyans who are saying, this is the situation in Kenya, just to try and counter what the government is putting out there in terms of what it's saying is being achieved, but painting the real situation on the ground. So I think there's been an increased involvement of the young people in governance. The only thing that you're lacking right now is appointments in leadership, and most of these things are done politically. And it's very hard for a young person to be appointed, for example, even in these 15 positions, if you're not political. These positions are not going to be appointed or assigned purely based on merit. There's going to be political inclinations to it.
All right.
Like I've seen in the shortlist some people who are retirees. I remember last year the president said his government is not going to accept retirees to come and serve in public office. But I've seen so many shortlisted candidates who are over 60 years. So my take, and I know this is going to be judged in time when the final list comes out. You're going to see political alignment in these appointments. You're going to see young people, if they're going to be any, people who are, say, aligned to what the government is doing, and people who have, like, let's say, political sway from the regions they come from.
Okay. Yeah. Now, let me ask you, Tabitha.
Yes.
We are talking matters involvement in governance processes, and now that we have seen such a headline, what is a qualifying factor for a youth? Is just being a youth the only thing you have so that you can be included in, let's say, in such an opportunity?
You've just reminded me, a friend of mine, Professor George Outa, was telling me the other day that having the connotation of a youth sometimes is a bit misleading, because there is this entitlement that comes with it, that because I'm a youth, I'm below 35 years, then should be considered at that level. It's very true. But then if my colleague in studio today is arguing on the basis that these appointments are going to be given based on the political inclination, is very true, and that's the reality. So then it's a clarion call also for the young people now to understand that, you know, politics will not favor you because you're a young person or the political appointment. So now, what is your identification with political parties? You know, you cannot be partyless, and when parties are allocating positions to the people who are in those parties, because loyalty is part of these appointments, you know. You can only be loyal when we have seen that you're serving the agenda of the government, because at the end of the day, you'll not want to give somebody an appointment and then they will go there and serve interests that does not align with your agenda as a government. So the young people need to join parties or form parties of their own. Those parties, time immemorial, they are vehicles to power. They are the bargaining, you know, vehicles. They, you know, they're used to, you know, bargain for these things. So if parties is what is going to make us as young people, you know, get this slot, like me, I identify with ODM party. I believe this is a party that has a democratic, you know, ability to even bring more people on board. And people or other youths will dismiss it and say, you know, me, I don't want to be involved in politics. And when positions are being allocated, they're the first people to bash the government here and there. So we have to do what needs to be done. We have to get into these parties. We have to learn through the processes. And another thing I would want to mention is the bit of, you know, accepting to be nurtured. You cannot wake up today and want to be a PS the next day. There has to be a track record of what you've been doing as a young person, because these are not positions that are just given on silver platter. So then the young people need to start early. You need to, you know, build a track record. You need to start doing something that when now brought to the table will not also be questioned, because you cannot dismiss a 60-year-old with experience. Experience is what we need. So I think when I say that, then there are youths who are in these parties. They have been nurtured. They have been doing things that are very visible. Then they need to be considered if the party inclination is something that is playing part.
Opao, yes. Tabitha has said something about being nurtured. And
Lupao.
Okay. Yeah. Is it, do we have enough space, or have the leaders provided that chance that the youth need to be nurtured? Are the youth ready to be nurtured, or they just want to get into it directly so that they can say we are already in?
I think the youth want to be nurtured, in my opinion, and the youth have always been ready to be nurtured. If you look at the history of political parties in Kenya, the youth have been one of the strongest arms, one of the strongest wings of any political formation in Kenya. So the young people are always involved. But then when it comes to the bargaining table, when it comes to that handing out that election ticket, you'll realize the youth is now being sidelined and pushed over to the end of the table.
What goes wrong?
So, I mean, money is a big factor in terms of the competition between the experienced people or the older people and the young people. Because, for example, when it comes to political appointments, what happens behind the scenes is not what is talked about. Yes, I know there's a factor of being nurtured, there's a factor of experience, but there's also a factor of, you know, what can you do for me? You know, what can you bring for me that this other person cannot do? And that is the reality of any Kenyan appointment, or even sometimes in some of these job advertisements. So I feel like, yes, the young people in Kenya, they want to get into these positions, and they want to demonstrate that they can do that, and they can do these jobs. And we have seen instances where some very low, for example, jobs that are being advertised and they're asking for 10 years of experience. You know, you're asking for 10 years of experience, and it means you're mostly targeting people above 35 years for that matter. But when you look at the most of the applicants are mostly young people. So why don't you give an opportunity to a young person so that they can also have that platform to do what my panelist is saying, you know, a track record of things that I've done. And I think it's something that is being done in private sector. These days, in most of these companies in private sector, they have a program where they even recruit young people from campus, you know. They recruit young people and they do on-job training for you. So that is the period where they train you on how they want you to do the job. But that has really been lacking in public service. There's been talk about the government, having interns and even paying them, but it has been really difficult for such programs to benefit a majority of the young people because of how squeezed the opportunity is.
Tabitha, there's something about meritocracy and party affiliation. Which comes over the other?
Thank you for that question.
Especially when it comes to appointments and getting into governance of a country.
Meritocracy should be a key consideration because you cannot deliver on what you have no experience over, you have no credentials over. And I think that goes back to the question of what is the value of education? Because if the people whom have gone to school and studied for these things are not being given these jobs, and people who have not even, don't have credentials, they're being given jobs over them. So I would say that meritocracy and, being qualified for the job should be a key consideration. That is why I said even in the allocation of these 15 PSS positions, technocrats should be considered as a high factor. These people, are they able to deliver on these key dockets? But then, I like to be very realistic that at the end of the day, you have to have some alignment of sort, because how would you understand what you're supposed to do as a PS under Kenya Kwanza government? Kenya Kwanza had pillars of why they formed this government. So that means you have to understand, you have to be aligned with these particular key pillars. If Azimio was in government, then you'll have to understand what Azimio stood for in terms of government formations. So then you have to be aligned, you have to be, awake to the facts and why the government was formed. And you can be very good in delivery as a technocrat, but then also political goodwill and party support is a very key factor. You cannot give a job to somebody whom you'll get into your government and they bring disunity and they're not able to deliver for the government. So I think it's a very key factor, and they're very intertwined. So let them have the aspect of party involvement and party goodwill, but then let them people who have merit, they're being given jobs on merit, not just sycophants. So we are really also very tired of these position allocations, and you see very key senior government officials and CSS and PSS always just wanting to talk about politics rather than their jobs. So these are things that I think if meritocracy will supersede more of political inclination as well, will solve. So we need to really see how we give the balance so that we have service delivery at the end of the day. And this is what this government needs, by the way. We need to speak about what this government needs to really do in these 2 or so years to make sure that they're not just appointing people, but they're appointing people who will make sure that the agenda is served and Kenyans experience service delivery at the end of the day.
All right, we are going to talk about the oversight role that the people have taken, but we are going to do that after this short break. You're watching Good Morning Kenya. This is Entertainment Thursday, and the segment on air is Youth and Governance, and we are looking at youth and governance processes. And I'm having this conversation with Clive Opao, who is a governance expert, and Tabitha Ogutu, who is also a governance and development expert. And before we went on air, there's something I wanted us to delve into, because the youth have become very vocal online. Yeah. And my question to you, let me start with you, Opao. What do you think of the oversight role that it seems they have taken over?
I think I would like to, give it up to the young people in this country, because we've really come out guns blazing. Yeah. I think whatever, resurrected the young people in June last year has lived on up to this point, because we've seen the Kenyan youth have now become like a lion waiting to pounce on the available, government opportunity. Yes. That is, whenever something is not going on right, the young people are ready to talk about it, they're ready to post about it, they're ready to even make comical, videos about it and just communicate in a way that all of them can understand. And I think, like you've said, opposition has become clipped in this country. And I think it's only a matter of time, because we are expecting the AUC elections coming up in February this year. And many pundits are saying that whatever the outcome of that election will be, we are going to see a new political wave in Kenya. Because if Raila goes to the AUC, then it means he's left up, a big space for the Kenyan opposition. I remember, in the months leading up to the election, 2022, the president kept on promising about the official opposition, the office of the official opposition, which up to now has not been implemented. So we are struggling as a country to find a way of holding government to account. And as it is now, that role has been left to the young people and the civil society. And the challenge with that is that there's a challenge of the NIS. There's a challenge of abductions. There's a challenge that young people, whenever they speak out, whenever they say things, they criticize the government agencies are now coming after us. The government agencies led by KRA, led by NIS, they're tapping into our phones, they're tapping into our communications, and they're looking for us, and they're abducting us, and they're charging us with computer misuse, but at the end of the day, you find some of these cases being dismissed in court. So it is quite tough for a young person right now to be, to be formal opposition. But I think we are going in the right direction. And social media tools have really helped us in terms of even informing other young people across the country to join this kind of crusade, because of how we communicate, how we reach out to the young people has become easier. So whenever you post something online, millions of people are looking at it, and more people are gaining the energy to talk about whatever is not happening right in government.
Yes. What do you think, are we going to see more civic education online? Because even if we are talking about being involved in those governance processes, civic education has a role to play in all this.
Oh, yes.
So are we going to see it more, especially now you're approaching the 2027 elections?
Absolutely, yes. And let me just go back to this 15 PSs and the appointments the government has been doing of late. The president should also understand that we are the majority voters at the end of the day. So we are a very ripe voting basket if it's allocation of positions for the sake of garnering support in regions. It will work for him if he will bring more people who are qualified, not just for the sake of age. I keep repeating that you should not be given a position or appointment because you're a woman or because you are just a youth. You're a youth who can, deliver on these particular jobs. And we have, I will tell you, we don't have shortage of that. We have very experienced young people, who are doing incredibly. Even this docket of ICT CS,
yes.
The young people who are credibly, qualified in those particular, CS allocation positions. I'm telling you for the truth. So then we do not have shortage of that. So I would think that the president, if really you really want to get support for 2027, the young people still, they're the majority voters, and we are really looking at you and saying that we have voiced up our complaints, and we really not against the president, the individual.
Are the youth ready to take up to register as voters? Because
yes,
it has been said that they do not really show up when it comes to voting and all that. Henceforth, are we going to see a change? But
then, absolutely, yes. I would want to tell you that there has not been a time like this when the youth are very passionate about wanting their vote to count at the ballot, by changing the governance structures of this country, by taking leaders, including our MCAs and MPs, whom have become just puppets, and we call them ghost members of parliament in the villages, to go home. The youth want to bring change, not just at the presidency, like it's assumed, but from the bottom levels, of leadership, from the MC and whatnot. So it's a very a big conversation that should not be ignored. That the issue around civic engagement and civic education that you asked is something that the youth. You have seen already, they're doing it by themselves. And do not undermine the value of peer-to-peer influence. It's a massive one. And that is why you saw during the June 25th protest and the culminations of the other protests to that, they were able to influence themselves. We were able to influence ourselves as young people from different sectors, different parts of the country, and select a specific day through social media. The power of the new media is not something that somebody will sit down and just say it's digital wankers. No, these wankers who are young people, they have the power to influence themselves, even to go and take those voter registrations. And I am telling you, this is a space to be watched, and it's something to be noted. It should not be just be assumed as a mere conversation.
Clive,
yes,
she has talked about the demographic of the youth being the majority, but the question is, can you turn that demographic advantage into something tangible when it comes to choosing the leaders that qualify for those positions, or the leaders that you want?
Absolutely.
Or even getting into those positions?
I mean, I think the 2027 election is going to be very different compared to the previous elections in Kenya, because in 2022, 8 million Kenyans did not vote, and a majority of this number are mostly young people. If you look at the country right now, even as we speak, we're currently mobilizing, and we're in the process of forming a task force, a national task force for the youth, to assemble, to organize, and to finance youthful candidates for the next election. And we're encouraging every young people across the country who is ambitious and who believes that they can succeed in the area where they're going to vie as a representative to join us and to get in touch with us. Why am I saying this? Because there's an awakening, and even our parents have realized that the young people have now risen up to the occasion. My own parents, my own father, when I was in the last election, I can assure you, there was a position of a by-election that was created in my county when the Speaker for the Senate, for the National Assembly, His Excellency Moses Wetangula was appointed in the National Assembly. So there's a by-election in Bungoma County, and I went to my dad and I told him I can see an opportunity. I can see an opportunity for a young person, because an old person has left the table. It is now an opportunity for a young person to get in this seat. You can imagine, it's just, you know, straight after the August elections. And when I went home, the first thing that my dad told me was, he asked me, do you have a wife? You know, do you have a child? He asked me, do you have a house? So he hit me with these questions, and of course my answers were no, 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 no. But then I asked myself, really, as a country, are we still in those old centuries where we believe that change can only be brought by people who are married? Change can only be brought by people who have kids.
But
or
there's
change.
also a sense of responsibility when it
I
comes
know there's
to
a sense of responsibility,
taking care of a family.
But how many of these people who are elected, who have families, who have houses, who have wives, even 3 wives, but still go into parliament and make wrong decisions that are affecting the country for 30 years? How many of these older people, older generation, who are married, who have, you know, kids and all these things that society or culture has made us to believe, cannot be able to deliver for the people? But, you know, recently I went back home again, and I told my dad, I have now lowered my ambitions. I'm now looking at the seat, the parliamentary seat for Tongaren constituency. And I could see a change in tone in terms of what my dad told me. My dad is now getting a sense of young people have now risen to the occasion. And I think this gives credit to the June 25th protest that we had last year.
Yes.
So I can genuinely see that. Can you imagine if older generation, the older parents have already realized that young people can bring change? What about for the young people? What about the youth themselves, who are the change makers themselves? We believe in ourselves.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, in 2027, we're going to have a huge majority of young people voting. And I would like to challenge the Electoral Commission, because I think one challenge for the youth voting is, you know, the voting centers. We have majority of the youthful voters are mostly, let's say, in campus. There's a huge chunk who are in universities. And I'd like us to have a formula or a session, you know, just an organization where people can vote from where they are. We don't have to travel up country to vote. You know, let people be able to vote from where they are. Let it be easier. I know we're not at that level where we can have electric voting yet, but if young people can vote even from their own campuses, so that you don't feel like you have to travel up country to go and vote. Because some of us, you know, people who are registered as voters in their home counties, but when it comes to the election period, they feel like going up country is too far, so they stay, you know.
So there's that aspect of
so there's that aspect of, you know, where are you voting? So if we're able to change or, you know, find a formula of voting centers so that we can make it easier for the young people to be reached, And we've seen even in the United States, there's early voting. There's early voting in the United States. People vote weeks before the main election day.
Okay.
And that extended period of voting allows more people to get involved. And we've seen it even in the protests last year. I think you could see the first few protests were not very populated. There are not very many people. But when people started saying, kumbe watu wanaenda, people are going to town, people are going to... So I think if we have a way of, say, even having 2 days of voting, so that we don't limit everything in one day, is going to bring some change for the youth.
There's something he has mentioned, based on the anecdotes he has given us. Are we going to see the youth changing the perception of the older generation in terms of the way they are going to vote? Like, yes. Are they going to change their perception based on merit of the person who is asking for a seat, or is just going to be euphoric as we have always been used to?
Yes, first of all, let me tell you, you see, the same way the youth mobilized themselves and went to the strikes and the Maandamanos last year, the June 25th, and the culmination of the other ones before that. That is the same way they are going to mobilize themselves to go and vote. So that is not a question. And we would like to ask the government that, please, when we lose our IDs or we are coming to apply for these IDs, don't make it difficult. Reduce the time for application, because it's becoming also a very big challenge. And they're going to change the narrative, because we are more concerned about, at the end of the day, what, or the individual, what can they bring different when they're in that office. It's not like what we have been seeing over time, that the politics of tribe, the politics of psychopathy is what has made us come to the point where we have leaders who are very incapable. Like me, I have a member of parliament who I've never seen any time he is serving his second term ever speaking about the issues affecting the people of Game where I come from. And it's so unbecoming. And when you come to the ground, it's not like he's silent in parliament. When you come to the ground, he's performing. There is nothing he's doing for us in Game. And so, in 2027, particularly, I want to mobilize all the young people and even influence the old, so that we go and vote for leaders who can help us transform, starting from my MCA up to my member of parliament, going up. So for me, it's not about, at the end of the day, psychopathy or whatnot. It's about what is it that the individual will bring when they're in that office. And it has to come from a point of you know, when you go to the villages, unasikianga, nikipewa nitafanya, nikipatiwa nisijui nitafanya nini. No. There has to be a track record to this individual that is very visible. And so I think in that outlook, personally, I'm very interested. And even the president, we are going to, vote for him or not, based on what he'll be able to do, based on the agenda that he put in place and the manifestos that Kenya Kwanza as a government gave us. And so these are the basis for what, as you'll say, not personal attacks and these things. I also see that also as a young person, sometimes I want to differ with. It's based on what you're able to do, the deliverable. So for me, this is going to count very majorly in the upcoming elections.
What do you see? Because if we talk about party politics, sometimes when it comes to elections, you see, if you do not belong to a certain political party in a certain area, you will not be elected. Yes. So, but those within that political party, they are elected, like it's called a suit.
Yeah.
How are you going to influence that as youth now that you want to get into these leadership positions, or even change leadership in the areas that you come in?
I'll give you an example from where I come from, Tongaren constituency. Which was split from the larger Kimilili constituency. Our current MP is a member of Ford Kenya party, and he was previously in UDA, but when UDA and Ford Kenya came together in the previous election, he decided to defect to Ford Kenya so that he can align with the region. So, and then the former member of parliament is the Secretary General of DAP, and DAP is also, a pro-Western or a, native Western kind of political party, though I'm sure it wants to become a national party. So if I do my calculations right, I'm looking at 2027. There's no way I'm going to get, there's a possibility, but there's a slim chance of getting a Ford Kenya ticket, because the current holder who wants to vie for re-election comes from that party. DAP party, which is the second, popular party in the region, already has a candidate who's even the Secretary General of the party. So there's no way they can deny the Secretary General of the party the ticket and give to a young person who's probably vying for the first time. And I'm now looking at the current realignments in politics. Of course, we have our Inject Party, led by Morera Kebaso, which is one of the latest parties to be formed in Kenya. And I'm also looking at the former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, who is also in the process of forming his own party, and I believe is going to have a national outlook. So I think it's up to the young person to look at the mathematics. Lazima upige hesabu. Lazima uangalie, who are you vying against? Who are you competing against? What are the chances of you getting a ticket in that party? Yes, you can be loyal to a party, but you can be loyal to a party for 10 years before you get a chance. The current senator for Bungoma has been a personal assistant to the Speaker of the National Assembly for many years before he got a chance to be elected as a senator through the goodwill of the party leader. But of course, everybody has their own journey. Some people vie the first time they get elected. Some people have to vie a number of times before they get elected. But for me, I know that I'm coming from a rural county. I'm coming from a rural constituency. It's upon me to find a way of reaching out to the young people, because I know the women in my constituency, of course, they're mostly the majority of voters. But I believe that even the older generation are now endearing to the young people.
Now, let me ask this. And I'll start with you, Tabitha. In matters governance, what do you think has been the biggest hindrance for youth to be involved in matters governance?
First of all, before I answer that question, a few minutes earlier you'd asked about, and you mentioned about the president. There was a conversation in the BBI tax, not BBI rather, but the task force that was formed after the Azimio Maandamano last year, yes? And one of the key provisions was around the office of the opposition leader. Is something I totally disagree with 100%. You see, Baba has been seen as an opposition leader for many years. Nobody appointed Baba an opposition leader. So it's not a position being given. So we can have as many opposition leaders, because even the Gen Zs right now are opposition leaders. And that is the reason why you cannot keep asking, now that Baba has gone to AU, will be the opposition leader. Nobody appointed Baba opposition leader. Nobody appointed Baba kingpin in the Luo and Nyanza, where he has a very great support, in terms of community. So opposition should be left at such, because this is not an office that needs an occupant. This is a space that should just be left. Anyone who wants to bring the government and keep it on his toe, that is an opposition person. And so that is not something I think as a person I would welcome. Let the opposition just be opposition as it has been. It does not need an office or an occupant. The processes on governance and the limitation to youth participations, one of them is the issue of party and party involvement in the processes of giving appointments, and even we call them certificates of nominations, and some of the requirements sometimes. And I would sympathize with the youth in the parties where you see that a youth has been so popular, they have been so loyal, they have been in the party, and in all these parties you see this, because youths, we have the energy, passion and zeal to always push for some of these agendas. But at the end of the day, you'll find that when it comes to the elections, some of them or many of them are not being considered. And this is something I think all parties honestly should look at, including my own party, ODM. And I think we really are trying to strengthen that as a very democratic party, of course, which I will also ask that many youths should also see if they could join, But then they need to look at the youth not like just puppets and noise makers for them and whatnot. These are young people whom, if well given opportunity, and like they say that their argument is always that youths want things, they're called oven success, where you just put something there and then after 2 minutes then you want
immediate
it.
Success.
It's already. They should have processes of mentoring and nurturing youth leadership from a very tender age, and then we agree that when these people have gained the experience, and you see that incredibly even having, they also are very popular even on the ground, people should be not denied the opportunity to get this position. So number one is the party issue. Number two is the issue around money. Money is such a big issue in Kenya. when you come to see where I come from, I am known for so many development projects I do. And I started them when I was in campus because I realized at the end of the day, there are problems around me that if I was to wait for the government or my member of parliament to come and address, they might go unaddressed. And so in my small ways, how can I mobilize resources? How can I bring stakeholders on board to make sure that, for example, agricultural value chains and systems around my place and my constituencies, you know, are addressed? And so you'll realize that sometimes if you do not have the goodwill also maybe of having these people who can support you in these initiatives, when you come to the community as a young person and you want to tell an old mama that, you know, me, our friend Clive here, that I want to become the member of parliament for Tangaren, where Yesu wa Tongaren anatoka huko. And you do not.
Actually, my voter, my big supporter.
In Nyanza, we'll ask you, do you have majan? You know, so you say, hey, this one does not have majan. So because you don't get majan, like they say it, then they will not give you. They will not give you. So the conversation around tokenism in voting and the patterns is such a big issue and a limitation to the young people who wants to join politics and they have no money. Yes. So, but you see, if the parties will support the young people who are very promising. And have the capabilities, there will be reduction in this because you realize, like you were asking him, that sometimes you go and vote in suit. We call it suit, piece or whatever the pieces. And if you could just support young people in this particular, so that also in the process you just give them certificates, especially if they merit it. It will also increase the numbers of the youth in the democratic processes and even actively voting and even appointments.
All right. Nataka tumaliza na hii. Your clarion call to the youth.
Yeah, I mean, 2027 is very near, in my opinion. And if young people want to take up government in the next election, we need to start now. I know that there are very many challenges. Like we've said, election financing is a big challenge for young people. But at the same time, if we plan early, if we organize early, if we assemble early, if we bring us together early, because I'm looking at examples like, you know, 2005, when ODM was being formed. Nobody knew that ODM is going to be around for more than close to 20 years now. And it was just, it was a moment of saying, let's begin. It was a moment of saying, let's start. It was a moment of believing in yourselves and coming together. And I look at a situation where if young people start mobilizing now, we're going to form the next ODM party that is going to be around and rule Kenya for the next 20 years, or even 100 years and 50 years. So I'd like to encourage young people across the country to mobilize, you know, to come together. Let us get in touch. Let us identify ourselves from the different regions that we come from. Not in terms of, you know, our affiliation to political parties, but our youthfulness. Let us identify as people who want to bring change in the country. Let us identify as people who want to vie in the next election, and we come together and just plan on how we're going to win this election. And I'm very sure we're going to see victory come 2027.
Clive, there is nothing like forming the next ODM party. There is nothing wrong with the ODM party that exists. So I will just add that the young people, ODM party is the only party for the youth, and there is nothing good with being partyless. But then, this is my clarion call. Let us not kill our young people. Let us not abduct them. Let us allow positive criticism. Let us allow alternative voices of governance. And the young people should not tire to hold the government and their leaders accountable, because some of these leaders, we actively participated in voting for them. As I finish, this is my clarion call to the Kenyan president, that you have such a rich manifesto and agenda in terms of the Kenya Kwanza transformative agenda. We need to really see the people you elect get to work and deliver on that, Mr. President. You need to create employment, and you need to look at areas, especially agricultural area. This is an area, if well harnessed and invested in, we'll be having cottage industries that will result to bigger industries in our counties that will create employment. The issue on the digital upscaling, and by the way, is something that I've seen the government, you know, we also need to give credit where it's due. The government is really trying to create digital jobs, and you're seeing the initiative through Konza and the Jitume programs in all the counties, trying to get every ward to have a hub where youths can get online jobs. So we want to see intensification and working of these hubs. But then at the end of the day, it is going to be the question of what did we do when we had the opportunity as a government to make Kenya better. We need a better Kenya, and we need to build it together, not to tear it down. So that is my part in short for today.
Asante sana.
Just to remind Tabitha that there's no problem with forming another ODM party.
No, no, ODM is
Coming
fine.
from a background of computer science, I believe in innovation. I believe in new ideas.
That is a whole different conversation that we are going to have
coming
as
up
we
with
progress
new ways of doing things, and I believe it's good for the country.
time. But thank you so much for making time to come here on Good Morning Kenya and to participate in matters that touch on the youth, and because they're supposed to be part of social, political, economic platform in the decision-making processes. This is where we end this conversation, and thank you to Clive Opao, who is a governance expert, and also Tabitha Ogutu, who is a governance and development expert, for joining us here on Good Morning Kenya. This conversation is where we put a full stop. DJ, what do you have in store?
Great music always.
Take it away.